Good evening, everyone. I'm glad you could join us again. Good evening, Eddie. Yes, Eddie. Good to see you. Tonight, we're doing our third segment. We've been doing a series on walking with Jesus. So if you followed along, you know the first segment was waiting out winter, which we talked about the importance of learning how to wait. That waiting is a part of the child of God's life in growing. Just like the seasons. Seasons are transitional. We go through waiting seasons. So I encourage you to start out with that. Then the second segment was the holiness of hiddenness. That was our last segment that we had a couple of weeks ago. So tonight, I'm going into another segment. But before I do, I'm going to do a really, really quick, brief review because unlike my wonderful husband who preaches every week, I don't really preach every week. So I know it could be kind of foggy in your memory. What did she say again? That was a few weeks ago. I don't even remember what she said. So I'm just doing a very, very brief review. Put on your running shoes because I'm going to speed through this. And then I'm going to slow down when we get to the new segment. But I'm just doing this just to refresh our memories. Okay? The holiness of hiddenness. That God never wastes our time during uncelebrated and unseen seasons of our lives. And we discussed, do you remember the iceberg? We had this picture of the iceberg? The iceberg equation? Icebergs are only 10% visible. They're always 90% beneath the surface. 90% of an iceberg is invisible. But that 10 and 90 make it completely indestructible. Remember what happened to the Titanic? Ran into a giant ice cube and sunk. So we talked about the iceberg equation and how 10% is visible in our lives, but there's so much going on underneath the surface that God is doing that we don't even see. And the word hidden characterized much of Jesus' life. Jesus' life modeled this iceberg equation, and we talked about that. So I'm really going fast with this. Jesus had the most influential life in history, and yet his life reflected the iceberg. And what do I mean by that? Remember we said the first 29 years of Jesus' life are relatively silent. We don't really know much of what was going on in Jesus' first 29 years. It's hidden to us. So only 3 years of his life was brought out into the public. Less than 10%, like the iceberg. So 90%, think about it, 90% of Jesus' life here on earth was spent in the unseen, hidden places with his Father. We don't really know what was going on in his life during that time. Only 10% of his life we get a glimpse into. So Jesus' first 30 years were unseen and they were uncelebrated by people. But the whole purpose of this series is that for us to learn that unseen is not unimportant and unapplauded is not unproductive. That's where we're going with this series. All of Jesus' life was and still is completely indestructible. So that we covered this last segment, that Jesus' character and Jesus' anointing, his authority, his power, come only with Jesus' life. You can't separate it. And 90% of that life was what? Lived in quiet hiddenness, in seasons of hiddenness. So when we say, I want to be like Jesus, everybody says that. Every Christian says, I want to be like Jesus. But am I mindful of his desert experiences, his testings, the wilderness? Do I really understand how Jesus lived? When I say I want to be like Jesus. More often than not, we don't think of the invisible places where Jesus was. If we're totally honest, we don't want to sign up for that. We don't want to sign up for the life lessons that are in the desert, in the wilderness, in the testings. We think of Jesus' public life, the miracles, the great preaching. That's what we think of that we want to be like. But God does his best and beautiful work in our lives in hidden places. And if you remember, real briefly, we talked about where did you come from? Consider how you started. Your life began in a secret place. in the dark, covered place of a womb. That's where you and I started, in the secret. God knitted you there with his own hands in the dark, in the secret, where no one else can see. And these next two verses were so yummy from last time that I had to bring them back this time because it was such a blessing. I encourage you to read Psalm 139 to see the intimacy of God's awareness of your life. But I'm just giving you a couple verses here. I want you, as we read this verse, check out the hiddenness of it all. Check out the secretness of it all. That's what I want to emphasize tonight. Psalm 139, 13, 15, and 16. For you created my inward parts. This is David speaking. You covered me. Again, covered. You covered me in my mother's womb. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret hiding place and skillfully knitted together in the lowest parts of the earth. For your eyes saw my unformed embryo, and in your book all my members were written, and all my days were formed by the potter before they ever were. If there was ever a question about prenatal life and life in the womb, this forever settles that question. And the New Living Translation, I love it. It puts it this way. Read it in this translation. You made all the delicate inner parts of my body, and you knit me together in my mother's womb. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion, not in public, not in view, again in hidden places, as I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. So, when you were being formed, were you unseen? Yes, you were unseen. Were you unimportant? Absolutely not. You were important. God does his best work in unseen, hidden places. Your hidden months in the womb were crucial and formative. The things that happen in the dark and in the secret seasons of our lives are so crucial. We also considered, remember the growth of a plant? We talked about the growth of a plant. A plant's birth, if you look at a tree or any tomato plant, a plant's birth, how does it begin? It actually begins with its burial. Before a gardener can enjoy the fruit, she has to bury the seed in the ground. So life of a plant begins with its burial. The seed sits in the silence and the stillness of the soil. It's completely covered by dirt. No one sees it. And it appears to die. But it's not dead. There's a hidden transformation that's taking place under the soil, away from view. And suddenly new life appears, but in its season. That is a picture of what's going on in you and me. That's a picture of what God does in us. So from God's perspective, I want you to see hidden places, the hidden seasons in your life where nobody notices you, nobody knows what I'm doing, I'm unseen. I want you to see those seasons from God's perspective. This is how God sees it. Hidden places are sacred spaces. Why? Because new life comes in those hidden places. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. Hidden places are sacred spaces to God. God's work in your life and in mine is regeneration. It's all about regeneration. And he wastes nothing. Nothing is wasted in your hidden seasons. Not your time and not your tears. Absolutely nothing goes to waste. So during this whole series that we're going to do on walking with Jesus, it's vital that we learn, and it's my hope that we'll learn, that unseen is never unimportant, and it's never insignificant from God's view. not in Jesus' life and not in our lives. Okay? So that was the quick review. I'm running now, so now I'm going to slow down. Let me take a deep breath. And I'm going to talk a little slower, okay? We're going to move on to our third segment. And honey, this would be our foundation slide, okay, for the message. Choices and chapters. Choices and chapters. What's your story? We're going to move into that. You're going to say, wow, what's that all about? Can you tell what this is a picture of? I guess you can, right? Someone tell me.
Typewriter. Old-fashioned typewriter.
An old-fashioned typewriter. I remember typing on that, so I'm dating myself. This was way before computers and laptops, and even before word processors. Remember word processors? That was a big deal. Wow, word processor only came out. Well, I remember typing on these crazy ribbons where the bottom was black and the top was red. You know, and then they got really fancy, and then they used to have like a whiteout here, so if you made a mistake, you could backstep. And that was like, wow, everybody thought that was so fabulous. I don't even think they make typewriters anymore. Put typewriters out of business. So, but I put that there because I want to talk to you about how your choices and my choices co-write the chapters of our lives. Our choices co-write our chapters. And why do I use the word co-write? I was originally going to say choices write chapters. But I thought about it and I said, well, that's not really entirely true. Your choices only co-write your chapters because our personal choices, whether they're wise or unwise, don't entirely pen our pages. Our decisions are only part of our life story because God co-authors our chapters. Think about that. God co-authors your chapter. It's not just your choices, but there's a marriage between the two. And that's why I want to set a foundation. I want to set a foundation that we understand the sovereignty of God in our lives. But then we want to see, okay, how do my personal choices play into the sovereignty of God? So I want to give you some scriptural foundation. First of all, this is something the Lord personally told me. It's a life word. Years and years and years ago, I didn't even need to write it down because it's so engraved in my heart. The Lord told me that nothing about my life is random. Nothing about your life is... You're not out there on a wing and a prayer, floating along, hoping to make it through. Your life is by design and by choice. Where you are today is by sovereign design and by personal choice. There's a marriage between the two. Nothing in your life is accidental, coincidental, or lucky or unlucky. It is by design and by choice. There's scriptures to prove it. Jeremiah 29:11, famous verse, everyone knows it. For I know the thoughts and plans that I think towards you, says the Lord. Thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope. Imagine that. God is thinking about you. God has plans for you. God already has plans for you before you were born. So he's thinking about you, planning out, mapping out your life. Let's look at another verse. This is the verse we just read a few moments ago in our review, but I want to read it again because it frames my point. The psalmist said, all my days were formed by the potter before they ever were. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. Okay, so you see the design part, you see the sovereignty part. This is the part of your life that is by design. God has sovereign plans towards you. I stole one of my husband's slides, one of his slides that he shares because I like it. From Romans 8, verse 29 and 30. A New Testament verse telling us how we were planned, predestined by God, with the sovereignty of God. Romans 8, 29 and 30. Actually, why don't you read it? Shouldn't be one of you. You guys, let's read it together. Ready? For those who he foreknew,
He also predestined to be conformed to the image of His Son, in order that we might be the firstborn among many brothers. And those who He predestined, He also called. And those whom He called, He also justified. And those whom He justified, He also glorified.
So settle it in your mind. You're called. There's a plan for you before you were born. That's the divine destiny. That's the divine design of your life. That's the sovereignty part of your life. Now that being said, as a child of God, as God's child, there's always a divine cooperation in play in my life. It's not just all the sovereignty of God. There's a divine cooperation in play. What do I mean by that? The word cooperation, we all know that word, right? This is the literal definition of cooperation. It's the process of working together to the same end. And here's some great synonyms. Cooperation. It's a collaboration. It's working together. A combined effort. Teamwork. God is your teammate. Teamwork. Partnership. God is your partner in your life story. And unity. There's the marriage that I was talking about. God has a plan. Jeremiah 29:11. God has a plan. And I have a choice. That's the cooperation. That's why I say that our choices co-write our chapters. We are co-writers. God is a co-author with us in our earthly life story. Okay, so I want us to move into how important our choices are that we make. Here's our old-fashioned typewriter again. I love this quote. The choices you make you. Choose wisely. What's your story? Choices reveal who you are as a person. They unveil your character to the world. They unveil your character. Your choices reveal who you are to everyone around you. You know why? Because people don't know your intentions. You're not known. I'm not known by my good intentions, but I'm known by my actions. People don't know your intentions. They only know your actions. You're known by your actions, by your choices, by your decisions. So that being said, if I'm truly a child of God, my earthly choices, even if they're poor, even if they're unwise, will not alter my eternal destiny. I want to repeat that. If I am truly a child of God, my earthly choices will not alter my eternal destiny. Because why? Why? Because God is faithful and He's committed to me, even when I'm not committed to Him. He's married to me, even when I wander. So when I make bad choices, bad decisions as a child of God, it does not alter or in any way change my eternal destiny. That's important to know. And I was thinking about this week. Think of the story with the prodigal son. He left his father in a state of rebellion and went off. But the amazing thing was, think about it, he never stopped being the father's son. Even in his worst, lowest state, he was still the father's son. He never lost his sonship. His father never disowned him. He never disinherited him. He was always a son, even when he was in the pig pen. He was still a son. But the quality of his life suffered a great deal for a season due to his rebellion, until he returned to his father and his father restored him. Some people have to hit rock bottom. So I want to make that clear. Even if you or I make poor decisions as a child of God, if I am truly His, it will not affect my eternal destiny, but it will affect my quality of life. through my decisions. Look at what King David said. I think I quoted this in my prayer. In Psalm 139. The amazing thing about David is that he was an Old Testament saint with a New Testament heart. He was so way ahead of his time. He lived back in the Old Covenant, but he had a heart that was in the New Covenant. He saw ahead. Look what he says. Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I ride the winds of the morning, if I dwell in the remotest part of the sea, even there your hand will lead me, and your right hand will take hold of me. If I could ask the darkness to hide me and the light around me to become night, even the darkness conceals nothing from you, and I cannot hide from you. To you the night shines as bright as the day. Darkness and light are the same to you. And that was David back in the Old Covenant. And he grasped it. He saw it, that he was always God's, no matter where he went. And we know David had some great highs, but David had some really bad lows. But he never lost his standing with God. How much more us who are under a better covenant than David? We will never lose our sonship, our childhood, based on our decisions. Okay, but that being said, what's the importance of your choices? Here's the importance. We're going to get into it now. Choice affects the quality of our lives here on earth. And in some cases, even the longevity of our lives. Our choices affect our quality and can affect our longevity of our lives. Plus, think about it. Your choices also affect everyone around you. The people that you love, the people that love you. Your choices affect those around you. You're not an island unto yourself. You don't live unto yourself. So we need to do ourselves and do everyone we love a favor and choose wisely when we make decisions. That's why this particular segment tonight is about the choices we make us. Your choices make you. My choices make me. And doing nothing is a decision. I was having this conversation with my mom this week. I said, a lot of people think that, well, if I just don't do anything, I don't know whether I should turn right or left, so I just won't do anything. I'll just sit in traffic. I won't move forward. I won't go in reverse. I'll just sit in traffic. Do you know doing nothing is a decision? You're still deciding by doing nothing. And I'll tell you why. Because there are people in this world who think it's okay to live their lives as they please for a while. And they say, well, someday I'll turn around and come to Christ. But I'll do it on my timetable. I'll go to church tomorrow. I'll get serious about my relationship with Jesus tomorrow. I'll turn my life around tomorrow. But delay is costly. And delay is a decision. Don't be fooled. Don't be misled. Delay is a decision. No decision is a decision. It's called passive postponement. It's passivity. We need to realize that indecision is a decision in our lives. For instance, the time to be saved is when you hear the good news and you feel the Holy Spirit drawing you, and you understand the consequences of rejecting the Savior's love and his free gift. That's the time. 2 Corinthians tells us, behold, now is the accepted time. Now is the day of salvation. It's a now. Our God is a very now God. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for. The evidence, not yesterday's faith, not tomorrow's faith. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for. The evidence of things not seen. So I want to illustrate in a very simple and probably a comical way the principle of choice. I want to illustrate to you in a very simple, baby-like way about what is choice. And it's just a simple illustration, but I think you're going to get the message of it. I want to take us to two childhood boys, okay? Two little boys. We have Slim Jim here, and we have Chuck E. Cheese, okay? Slim Jim and Chuck E. Cheese. Now I'm going to take you through a little fast little slideshow of their life, okay? Growing up, childhood friends, we got Slim Jim. We have Chuck E. Cheese with a slice of pizza and a Coke. It's okay. Let's go on. They're growing up a little more. Slim Jim, Chuck E. Cheese with a giant lollipop. It's okay. Slim Jim. What you say?
He's getting fatter all the time.
He's getting fatter with each slide as we go. So we've got Slim Jim, and here we got Chuck E. Cheese. And we get a little older, teenagers, and poor Chuck, he can't even fit in his pants anymore. He's popping out in his pants, okay? Now this is what I want to tell you in a very simple way about choices. Let's compare Slim Jim and Chuck. Slim Jim, from a child, made unapplauded choices in his youth to exercise fairly regularly and to eat healthy foods. But he was not a high school star athlete. He didn't get a sports scholarship. No scouting coach ever came to see him play. He wasn't out there famous. He never appeared on the cover of a nutrition magazine. He was never featured in Sports Illustrated. He wasn't voted most likely to succeed at anything. He wasn't on anyone's radar. He just made consistent, simple, unapplauded choices to eat healthy and eat regular. Now we have Chuck E. Cheese. Now Chuck E. Cheese also made consistent choices, unapplauded choices. Now his choices was, he ate mac and cheese instead of veggies, okay? His idea of fruit and veggies was strawberry shortcake and sweet potato pie. That was his idea of fruit and veggies. Mm-hmm. He guzzled down Slurpees instead of milk. He chose video games instead of team sports. So you see how Slim Jim made choices, Chuck E. Cheese made choices as they grew. Now, although he didn't realize it, Chuck's inactivity was in fact a choice. Why was it a choice? His inactivity was a choice against exercise, against healthy diet, and against his future well-being. All of these choices were choices against his future well-being. So doing nothing, inaction, is in fact an action. That's the point I want to drive home here. So today's decisions or indecision will eventually become your reality tomorrow. So whatever decision I make today will become my reality tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Just like yesterday's spending habits will become due tomorrow. That's the problem with credit cards. They give you the illusion that you're really not spending anything, but you are. Mm-hmm. So my spending habits today will become payable and due tomorrow. Mm-hmm. That's choices. Some people never get to it. I'll decide later, I'll make the choice tomorrow, I'll get to it later. Some people never get to it, get to the choices in their lives. So now I'm gonna fast forward though. They're growing. High school. Now Slim Jim looks like he could maybe be on the wrestling team. Maybe. Chuck E. Cheese, he looks more like a sumo, like a sumo wrestler to me. So high school. Now look how nice Slim Jim looks, right? He's all dressed up for prom. Poor Chuck had no date for prom. He went bowling instead. So he went bowling instead. Okay, you see the choices going on. Here we are in college. Slim Jim on the track team, running. And Chuck still with his Big Mac. Here we have in their 20s. Slim Jim still in shape. Chuck still with an inner tube. And here we are at chapter 30 of their lives. Chapter 30, meaning year 30 of their lives. Slim Jim's still looking pretty good. Chuck's pretty unhappy. Okay. So later didn't come for Chuck. Chuck was making all these unapplauded choices and decisions, but later didn't come until chapter 40. Here we come to chapter 40 in their lives. Slim Jim's okay, and Chuck now is having to deal with experiencing the side effects of obesity and being overweight. Now it's hitting home in chapter 40. The decisions that were made over decades is now coming home. So this is a question. I took you on a little humorous trip with Slim Jim and Chuck, but I want to ask you a question. Both Slim Jim and Chuck are facing increased poundage over the years. It's just natural. People will get a little heavier than they were when they were teenagers. So they're both dealing with increased poundage. But here's the question. Whose past choices will incline him to make healthy decisions now? Whose past choices will help him make healthy decisions now? Jim, right? Slim Jim. Because he's cultivated, his choices have accumulated over the years. He's cultivated a momentum of choices so that it will incline him to choose healthy choices now. So Slim Jim's choices have clustered together over the years and they've created a momentum toward healthier living. So does that mean poor Chuck is doomed to the fat farm forever? Definitely not. Definitely not. He's definitely not doomed to stay in that state. But here's the truth that I wanted to bring out in a humorous way. The momentum of Chuck's past poor choices will now create a resistance as he tries to head in a new healthy direction. Our choices create either momentum for us or they create resistance if we try to turn around. Our choices are cumulative. They accumulate. They don't just affect the present moment. That's what's important to see. They affect our future. And now, this is chapter 40. So now, look at chapter 80. Look at Slim Jim at chapter 80. He's still running. He's still looking good. Still looking good at 80. Poor Chuck, he's not looking so good. But so, this is accumulation of choices. That one. Now this is a humorous thing and you can say, oh, it's silly. But it's driving home a point. That for better or worse, the decisions we face today reflect the choices we made yesterday. For better or for worse. That's why choices are so important. To be in cooperation with God's will for your life. So that we don't end up looking like Chuck E. Cheese. And I don't mean physically, I mean all of us have a few spare pounds. But I think you get the point of what I'm saying. It's about our quality of life. The choices that we make. So I want to move into an actual Bible story that illustrates choices. And I'm going to take it straight from the book of Nehemiah. I don't know how often you read Nehemiah. I very rarely read Nehemiah. But I was drawn to Nehemiah this week, and it illustrates the point about choices. And that how God's plan for our lives. I'm going to give you this slide. If you know anything about Nehemiah, I'm going to give you a little brief history. But Nehemiah was instrumental in leading and rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem. You probably all know that. The plan was to restore, rebuild, and reinforce. Is that not what God does in us? Is that not what our life journey is all about? Restoring us, rebuilding us, and reinforcing us in the areas that we've been weak. God's plan for our lives is to bring us back. Where? From destruction to construction. From rubble and ruins to renewal and restoration. Let's repeat that. God's plan is to bring you back from destruction to construction. From rubble and ruins to renewal and restoration. But, and there's always a but, there's an enemy. You have an enemy. I have an enemy. who viciously opposes the work of God in your life. And what is the work of God? The work of God is wherever God is rebuilding, restoring, and reinforcing in your life. Whatever God is up to in your life, whatever he's healing, whatever he's rebuilding, whatever he's restoring in you, that's the work of God. And that's exactly the place that Satan will target. And I want to draw your attention to the wall because there's such a parallel here. The story of Nehemiah. Real quick, just to give you a background. In 586 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the temple in Jerusalem. And he scattered the Jews throughout all of Babylon. They were scattered. About a century later, Nehemiah came on the scene. And he was a cupbearer to the Persian king, as well as the governor of Judah. So he held a very influential position in Persia. And actually, Judah was a province of Persia at that time. However, the walls of Jerusalem, because of Nebuchadnezzar and what he did, he devastated Jerusalem. They had been torn down, and all the gates were burned. They were destroyed in fire. So the city was in a state of complete ruin. Now, why were the walls so important? I'm sure you know about ancient cities. Okay, they didn't have the Air Force or the military or nuclear bombs. Ancient cities, their defense was always a wall. That's what defended a city, was its walls. And so the walls symbolized the strength and the protection of God over the people. The walls were crucial to the vitality of the city. It was their first line of defense. And so it's in the same way that God wants to clear away the rubble out of our lives and rebuild our walls that have been torn down. So God places within Nehemiah's heart the vision to rebuild Jerusalem's broken walls. And he granted him favor with the Persian king. The Persian king said, go ahead, do everything that's in your heart to do. I'm supporting you. And so under Nehemiah's leadership, the people started to rebuild those broken walls. But, now here's where we get to the but. While they're rebuilding, there were enemies who opposed God's call in Nehemiah's heart and his plan for his people. There was opposition. And in this particular story, there's three main villains. We have Sanballat, which literally means bramble bush or enemy in secret. Can you imagine naming a kid enemy in secret? That's literally what his name meant. So he was a bad character. Then we had Tobiah and Geshem. So we had three enemies. And actually, Tobiah was an Ammonite and Geshem was an Arabian. So they were not of Israel, but these three clustered together and conspired to take down the rebuilding of this wall. And so this is what I want us to see tonight. The enemy's strategies that he uses against you and against me to get you off that wall. And where's the wall? The wall in your life is the place where God has appointed you to be. Whoever that is. If it's in a church, if it's in a ministry, if it's in a family, if it's on a job, wherever God has appointed you to be, that is your wall. Just as God had appointed Nehemiah to stand on that wall and rebuild that wall. And the enemy came and did everything he could to get Nehemiah off that wall, off that appointed place of God for him. The enemy tries to distract you, to derail you, and to detour you from that wall, from God's appointed place. So I want you to, we're going to look at 4 tactics tonight as we're closing, please. We're going to look at 4 tactics straight out of the book of Nehemiah that the enemy used to get Nehemiah off that wall, off that appointed place for him. The first one is, I'm going to do some reading for you here. Bear with me as I go through my iPad here. Okay, so Nehemiah 2, okay, because we can't obviously go through the whole book, so I just want to read these portions to you because they highlight my point. Okay, so bear with me as I get to Nehemiah 2. Okay, Nehemiah 2. Check this out. But when Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem the Arab heard of our plan. This is Nehemiah talking. They scoffed contemptuously. It's a mouthful. What are you doing? Are you rebelling against the king, they asked? And I replied, the God of heaven will help us succeed. We, his servants, will start rebuilding this wall, but you have no share, no legal right, or no historic claim in Jerusalem. Then they go on. But Sanballat, remember, the enemy in secret? Sanballat was very angry when he learned that we were rebuilding the wall. He flew into a rage and mocked the Jews, saying in front of his friends and the Samaritan army officers, what does this bunch of poor, feeble Jews think they're doing? Do they think they can rebuild the wall in a single day by offering a sacrifice? Do they actually think they can make something of stones from a rubbish heap? Tobiah, who was standing beside him, his partner in crime, remarked, that stone wall would collapse if even a fox walked along the top of it. It's a pathetic wall. And this is Nehemiah's response. Then I prayed. Hear us, O God, for we're being mocked. May their scoffing fall back on their own heads, and may they themselves become captives in a foreign land. Do not ignore their guilt. Do not blot out their sins, for they have provoked you to anger here in front of the builders. At last the wall was completed to half its height around the entire city, for the people had worked with enthusiasm. So here's episode number 1 that I want to show you. Remember his goal? To get you off that wall. Get off the wall. First way he'll try. Satan tries to mock, intimidate, and put you down. When you are standing in the place of God for you and you are doing what God has called you to do not be surprised when others come around. Sanballat, Tobiah, and Gershom come around. And people come around to mock you in what you're doing, to intimidate you, or to put you down. And oftentimes they will do it publicly. It will not just be private, but in public. Let me get back to my notes here. He will do it publicly in front of others to attempt you to look at yourself and your circumstances instead of God. That's the enemy's strategy, to get you to look at yourself, look at you with this stupid little wall. You're never going to go anywhere with this wall. Who do you think you are? What do you think you're doing? Look at you with this silly little church. Look at you in this silly little basement. Where do you think you're going? Look at you in this dead-end job. Look at you with your measly finances. It'll never change. All Sanballat, all the enemy trying to intimidate, mock, and provoke you to get your attention on yourself and not on God. Get off that wall. Remember, that's his goal. He's got to get you off that wall, off the place that God has appointed you to be. And what was Nehemiah's response? He went immediately into prayer. Immediately into prayer. And I think of our prayer partners here. Okay, that's tactic number 1. Let's go to tactic number 2. I'm going to go back to Nehemiah 4. He wasn't done yet. But when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs heard that the work was going ahead, and that the gaps in the wall of Jerusalem were being repaired, they were furious. They all made plans to come and fight against Jerusalem and throw us into confusion. But we prayed to our God and guarded the city day and night to protect ourselves. Then the people of Judah began to complain. The workers are getting tired, and there's so much rubble to be removed. We'll never be able to build the wall by ourselves. And meanwhile, our enemies were saying, before they know what's happening, we will swoop down on them and kill them and end their work. The Jews who lived near the enemy came and told us again and again, they will come from all directions and attack us. They were panicking. So, what does Nehemiah do? I placed guards behind the lowest parts of the wall in the exposed areas. I stationed the people to stand guard by their families, armed with swords and spears and bows. Then as I looked over the situation, I called together the nobles and the rest of the people and said to them, don't be afraid of the enemy. Remember the Lord who is great and glorious, and fight for your brothers, fight for your sons, fight for your daughters, your wives, and your homes. Now, when our enemies heard that we knew of their plans and that God had frustrated them, we all returned to work on the wall. But from then on, only half of my men worked, while the other half stood guard, with spears and shields and bows. The leaders stationed themselves behind the people of Judah, who were building the wall. So half were building, and half was guarding the wall, guarding the people. And all the builders had a sword belted to their side. Now, what does this remind me of? The trumpeter stayed with me to sound the alarm, the shofar. Here's where we see the shofar in Scripture. Then I explained to the nobles and the officials and all the people, the work is very spread out. They were spread out over miles. And we are widely separated from each other along the wall. When you hear the blast of the shofar, rush to wherever it is sounding. Then our God will fight for us. The shofar was used as a rallying call. It was used as an alarm, and it was used to gather people. The shofar. We worked early and late, from sunrise to sunset, and half the men were always on guard. I told everyone living outside the walls to stay in Jerusalem. That way, they and their servants could help with guard duty at night and work during the day. During this time, none of us, get a load of this, none of us, not I, nor my relatives, nor my servants, nor the guards who were with me, ever took off our clothes. We carried our weapons with us at all times, even when we went for water. Always prepared. So this leads me to the second strategy that I wanted to show you. What else will Satan do to get you off that wall? Satan will threaten you with fears to distract you from God's purpose. What happens if I step out in faith? Oh, I don't know what's going to happen if I do this. I might fall on my face. I might look stupid. Or something bad might happen. All fears to get you off that wall. Threatenings, fears. I don't think I really have to give you many examples. I think we know in our own lives how the enemy does that. Do you know one effective tool that the child of God has against Satan is to simply ignore him? The enemy hates to be ignored. He loves attention. He loves your thoughts. He loves your focus. One of the best weapons you can wage against Satan is to simply ignore him. James 4:7. Submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Ignoring him is a very effective weapon in our thought life, especially in our thought life. Not giving attention to every little fear. You know, birds can fly, you know that saying, birds fly over your head? But I don't need them to build, I don't have to allow them to build a nest in my head. Ignoring him. He wants your attention. Tactic number 3. Let's go on in Nehemiah. Nehemiah 6. Now here comes the 3 criminals here. Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem the Arab. And the rest of our enemies found out that I had finished building the wall and that no gaps remained, though we had not yet set up the doors of the gates. So Sanballat and Geshem sent a message asking me to meet them at one of the villages in the plains. But I realized they were plotting to harm me. So I replied by sending this message to them. I'm engaged in a great work, so I can't come. Why should I stop working to come and meet with you? 4 times they sent the same message, and each time I gave the same reply. The 5th time, Sanballat's servant came with an open letter in his hand, and this is what it said. There's a rumor among the surrounding nations, and Geshem tells me it's true, that you and the Jews are planning to rebel, and that's why you're building the wall. According to his reports, you plan to be their king. He also reports that you have appointed prophets in Jerusalem to proclaim about you, look, here's a king in Judah. you can be very sure that this report will get back to the king. So I suggest that you come and talk it over with me. Let's negotiate. I replied, there is no truth in any part of your story. You're making up the whole thing. They were just trying to intimidate us, imagining that they could discourage us and stop the work. So I continued the work with even greater determination. Back to my third point here, and this is probably the most dangerous and subtle method that the enemy uses. When he can't bully you off the wall, when he can't threaten you off the wall, he will try to negotiate with you and get you to compromise. Compromise your calling. Compromise your appointment. Compromise the very thing that God has told you to do, and compromise the very place where God has told you to stand. If he can't bully you out of it, he will try to negotiate with you and compromise you. And I'm going to have an example of that in a little while, in a practical way. In the garden, Eve got into trouble. Why? Because she engaged the serpent in a conversation that she should have never done. Do you know the only conversation we can safely engage with the enemy begins with 3 words. It is written. Jesus modeled it for us. That should be our only conversation engaging our adversary. It is written. Anything else can get us into trouble. And so I want to give you the 4th strategy now that we see with rebuilding this wall. The enemy tries to use to get us off the wall. You know, it's funny, when I did this visual, it reminded me with this circle here, it looks like a CD. It's like a CD, and I was like, well, that's a CD I definitely don't want. You don't want it, and I don't want that CD get off the wall. But it looks like a CD to me. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So I'm going to give you the fourth strategy now. I lost my place here. Hold on a minute. We're finishing up in Nehemiah 6 again, verses 10 through 14. Now here's Nehemiah talking again. Later I went to visit Shemaiah, who was confined to his home. And he said, let us meet together inside the temple of God and bolt the doors shut. Your enemies are coming to kill you tonight. But I replied, should someone in my position run from danger? Should someone in my position enter the temple to save his life? No, I won't do it. Nehemiah was some man. He had a lot of spunk. I realized that God had not spoken to him, but that he had uttered this prophecy against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. They were hoping to intimidate me and make me sin. Then they would be able to accuse and discredit me. Remember, oh my God, all the evil things that Tobiah and Sanballat have done. And remember Noadiah, the prophetess. There was even a prophetess, a woman involved in this. And all the prophets like her who have tried to intimidate me. And here's where we finish up with Nehemiah. So on October 2nd, the wall was finished. Just 52 days after we had begun. Can you imagine that? 52 days after we had begun. When our enemies and the surrounding nations heard about it, they were frightened and humiliated. They realized this work had been done with the help of our God. And Tobiah kept sending threatening letters to intimidate him. So he kept going on. So that's it. I want to give you now the 4th point, which I told you there were 4 strategies. The 4th strategy is this. To get you off that wall, Satan will woo you with false counsel. What is false counsel? His advice always sounds reasonable. It's logical. It's comfortable for me. And it's convenient. When he can't bully you, when he can't threaten you, when he can't intimidate you, then he will woo you off that wall. And that probably is the most dangerous strategy, the most subtle, insidious strategy of all of them. Because the other ones we can probably more quickly recognize. This one's very subtle because it appeals to our flesh. It's harder to recognize. But Nehemiah perceived that the counsel he had received from that false prophet was a deception. He perceived it and he discerned it, that it was not the counsel of God in his life, and he rejected it. You know, it dawned on me just this afternoon, a New Testament example of this. In Matthew 16, we all know this episode. Jesus began to reveal to his disciples the Father's plan. That he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things. That he was going to die. And that he was going to rise again. And then Peter steps up and attempts to talk Jesus out of his calling, out of his destiny, out of the mission the Father gave him. What does he say? My Lord, may God forbid it. This will never happen to you. And Jesus smells a rat in Peter's words. And he discerns the true source of Peter's words. And what does he say? Get behind me, Satan. You're a stumbling block to me. For you are not setting your minds on the things of God, but on the things of man. Opposing the plan of God. If he could talk Jesus out of going to the cross, he could undo all of salvation's plan. Ruin. Jesus, may it never happen to you. Ruin. Ruin. Very subtle. As I said, the war was finished in 52 days. Yay. Now I want to close with a question for us to ponder. When you're presented with choices that involve your time, your resources, your talents, and your treasures, do I involve the Lord in my decision? And here's a question you have to ask yourself, and I have to ask myself, and it's profound and it's deep. Is it a good thing, or is it a God thing? Two very separate things. There are good things that is not God's thing. You have to ask yourself when you're presented with an opportunity and decision, is this a God thing, or is it a good thing? Because not every good thing is a God thing. But every God thing is a good thing. Distractions often come disguised as good things. Very rarely does the enemy work this way with a true child of God and tempt you, well, go into that store and shoplift. Go into that bar and get drunk. Go out and commit adultery. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Those are extreme cases, it does happen. But more often than not, the way Satan tries to get us off that wall, to move us out of the appointed place of God in our lives, is very subtle. It's not those bad things. It's good things. But it's not a God thing for us. And I want to give you a practical example of that tonight as we close. And I heard this testimony, and it really made an impact on me in the past week. There's a Christian speaker and author, and you might have heard of her, Christine Kane. She's on TV a lot, very famous. And she shared a practical illustration of a God thing versus a good thing in her life. She's a busy wife. She's a mom. She's the founder of a global organization that fights human trafficking. And she was pursuing higher education, so she's got a lot of things going. And she recalled this one night that her girlfriend called her up with good intentions to invite her out to a night at the movies. Her friend was very persuasive, reasoning that, you know, Christine, you need a break. You deserve some fun time. You need to get out. You deserve this. You earn this. And her invitation was very appealing. It was well-intentioned, and it was very appealing. And Christine recalled that she had a decision to make at that moment. Give in to a harmless night of fun, or stay the course with her priorities for that week that she had already made. In that moment, Christine chose to stay the course. And why? Because going to the movies that night would have set off a domino effect in her life for that week, and I'll tell you how. It would have meant a very late night out for her, and she would have had to return home from the movies to finish a school paper that night that was due the following day. So that means she would have had very little sleep. She would have had an early wake-up call the next morning. She would have been weakened physically, mentally unsharp, and ill-tempered from her lack of sleep. All that from one little decision to go to the movies. And Christine realized that an ill-timed decision to get away, as enticing and as appealing and as harmless as it was, would not only affect her present moment, but it would have a long-range ripple effect in the rest of her week. Ripple effects of our decisions. Our decisions affect not only the present moment, but they ripple through our future, too. Our choice, remember Chuck and Slim Jim? Our choices cluster and they accumulate and they gather momentum in our lives. They affect not only the present moment, but they create a momentum that also impacts our future. So for Christine that night, was there anything wrong with going out to the movies? Absolutely not. There was nothing wrong with going out to the movies. But at another time, it would have been a fun experience. But tonight, the movies would have been the wrong choice at the wrong time. It's all about discerning. It's all about growing up. It's all about walking in the rhythm and grace of the Father. There's nothing wrong with the movies, but it was the wrong choice at the wrong time, and it would have had ripple effects. Remember, when the enemy, and this is the point I wanted to bring home, when the enemy can't bully you off the wall, then he will attempt to woo you away from the wall. Come to the movies. You deserve a night out. You're working hard. Forget about the paper. Come to the movies. When he can't bully you, he'll woo you away from your priorities, from what God has appointed you to do. It's so subtle. It's not bad things. It's good things. It's harmless things, but they're not in the timing of God for us. A good thing versus a God thing. This is what we need to ask ourselves. Is this a God thing, or is this a good thing in my life? Is it a God thing? I came up with some practical examples because this is kind of where we all live. I'm sure you can come up with other examples in your life. Is it a God thing? An open door? A new opportunity? A business venture? A job promotion? A relationship in my life? A ministry? Any project I embark on? A hobby or a habit? And a financial investment I'm about to make? Is it a God thing? It may not be a bad thing. It could be a good thing, but is it a God thing? Big difference. Every God thing in your life for you is a good thing. But not every good thing is a God thing. Get it? And not every good thing is a God thing, but every God thing is a good thing. Psalm 84:11. The Lord God is a sun and shield. The Lord gives grace and glory. No good thing will he withhold from them that walk uprightly. He's not looking to withhold anything from you. He's not looking to rain on your parade, to spoil your party, to hedge you in the sense of restricting you. He's not looking to restrict you. He's looking to give you the best. And sometimes, good is not best. And it's all about discerning the difference. James 1:17. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom is no fickleness. He doesn't change his mind. He's not up one day and down the next. There's no fickleness in your Father. Neither is there a shadow of turning. My final slide as we close. Let's be purposeful people. Not just floating around, not just letting things happen to us. Let's be purposeful people, because the decisions we make us. And very often they will also make the people around us. You will either elevate people around you, or you can diminish people around you by your decisions, by the way you live. Amen? Amen. Let's go to prayer. Thank you, Heavenly Father, that you love us so much, that you want to cooperate with us in giving us a good quality of life. You want to give us the best. You don't want us to settle for second best. And so my prayer tonight is that we may all grow up in Christ and be able to discern the good thing versus the God thing and choose the God thing. I pray that we will not be scared off the wall that you've appointed, the place you've appointed us to be, that we will not be intimidated by others, threatened by others, or have others cause us to compromise what you've called us to do and where you've called us to stand, and that we will not be wooed away through deception, Lord. Help us to stay the course. And we can't do it in ourselves. It's impossible. But with you, nothing is impossible. Through the power of the Holy Ghost, Lord, you can reveal all truth to us and help our feet to stay the course. Because when a man's heart is right, his feet will always find the right path. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Amen.